again. So we're here today with an extra tasty morsel of Kino Inferno, where we're going to do a little get to know the hosts thing. You should probably know a little bit more about us, other than just our really bad takes on films that you probably really like. I'm here. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Aidan. I'm going to ask him some questions today.
What's up?
Oh, that's a dated reference.
Yeah, but it's still good.
It's still good. Although it's weird, actually, because I don't think of the Budweiser commercials whenever someone says that. I think of Scary Movie. I always think of that.
Was it Budweiser?
Yeah, it was a Budweiser commercial, yeah. I was like commercial, advert.
When I think of Budweiser adverts of the past, I think of the frogs going, Budweiser.
Yeah, that was, I think that was just before the Was Up campaign, actually. But no, yeah.
What's up?
Yeah, it was literally a Budweiser thing. I'm pretty sure it was.
I'm trying to bring Was Up back, because it's my favourite way to answer the phone. Was Up?
I'm a fan of Ahoy Hoy, personally.
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein.
Yeah, I used to work with a guy who, whenever he'd pick up the work phone, that's how he would greet people. It'd just be, ahoy hoy, and he had to stop after a while because the general manager got really pissed off with it.
I know someone at work who answers their phone by just going, speak.
That's really intimidating.
Yeah, that's like next level.
Yeah, that'd really throw me, like, and especially in like a workplace setting as well.
Anyway, let's stop talking bollocks. I've not introduced him. I'm Aidan.
I mean,
hi. You know this probably. You've probably listened to the previous episodes.
Well, we'd hope so, at least. If they're starting with these ones, I mean, that might be better if they do that. But
yeah, we should have done these episodes first, really. But
when have we ever planned anything on this show? Yeah,
that's good. That's a valid point.
Yeah, very
valid point.
So yeah, Aidan, do you want to tell the lovely people listening anything about yourself?
I'm Aidan. I'm
well done.
19 years old.
Or at least that's what your Twitter page says.
That's my acting age. I'm not on Twitter. Don't look for me on Twitter. Yeah, so I'm Aidan. I'm 28. I have a podcast called Kino Inferno. I occasionally make films. I'm a friend of Mark's from Operation Desert Storm. Which we both served in, of course, in the first Gulf War. That was a lie. We actually both went to university together.
Which is the same as going to war, I guess, but...
Yeah, I mean, we certainly treated it as if it was Operation Desert Storm.
We listened to, like, Cleveland's Clearwater Revival like, every day. That was one thing that we did. That was NAM, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm getting my wars mixed up.
The first Gulf War was the 90s, so I can only assume they were listening to like Ace of Base and stuff. Imagine the choppers coming over the horizon to "All That She Wants Is Another Baby." That'd be more sinister, if anything.
Was it Ace of Base where one of the members was like a neo-Nazi or something?
Yeah.
I remember something about that. We'll have to get a fact-checking goblin in for that.
I don't. I know this.
Okay.
Yes, one of them was associated with, neo-Nazi movements. In fact, the name of the band Ace of Base, there was a Nazi establishment in World War II, which was called the Ace of Bases.
Oh.
Which was like a supposedly impenetrable fortress.
And
yes.
And they named like a sort of Europop new wave act after that.
Yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting one because there is like a big conspiracy theory about like Ace of Base being like a neo-Nazi band. I don't know how much water that holds, really.
No, but that definitely makes their music more interesting.
And we should probably say, for the sake of I don't know, legality, that the geezer who was in a neo-Nazi group is no longer associated with them, and has in more recent years has distanced himself from those beliefs and views.
Well, that's good to know, at least. I'm really happy that this little bonus episode where we're going to get to know things about you has turned into a history lesson on Ace of Base.
Yeah, if I've got any of that wrong, I will drop in the fact-checking goblin to correct me. But I'm pretty sure that's the broad strokes.
Yeah, I remember reading something about that, but I wasn't quite sure if what the.
I'm sure it's one of those things that's like overstated as well. Like I'm sure it's not as like I don't think he was going around kicking people's heads in or anything like that. Like it's one of those things where I think we don't realise how much in the sort of 80s and 90s in Europe there was like a real like fascist resurgence. But or rather that, you know, there was like fringe groups who were like you know, into neo-Nazis and stuff, but a lot of them were posers rather than... A lot of them weren't posers, but a lot of them were.
But it just so happens that this one in particular happened to be in a somewhat successful pop group. So, yeah, that is...
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, if you dig below the surface of a lot of Swedish, you know, media figures, you will find some stuff that is not great about them.
Oh, not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but isn't, like, some of the members of ABBA have some kind of connections to something like that as well?
Allegedly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole of things that we don't really... Well, we shouldn't be going down because this episode's all about you, unless... I mean, clearly you're some kind of expert on these matters, but...
No, I've just read about this. Probably going to cut all of this out, to be honest.
Anyway, we'll get to the matter at hand. So, yeah, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just so the people who are listening can sort of get a better sense about, you know, your attitudes and thoughts on movies and stuff like that. You're going to do the same for me in the next episode, so that's going to be fun. So some of my questions are kind of standard, really, but I think they, you know, will give people listening a good idea of you. So my first question for you, was there a particular film or possibly even like TV series or anything that made you just go, this is what I want to do? Because obviously, you know, you make films and you write a lot and stuff. Like, was there any specific film that was like sort of turned that light bulb on for you, essentially?
Oh, now that's hard to quantify. There's definitely I don't know if there was one particular film that I can pinpoint, but definitely there was a point where I sort of started to think about the production side of films as a fairly young kid. I would say like the kind of Star Wars original trilogy. I think one of the things that I remember about that was like my mum telling me that you know, the voice of Darth Vader was a different bloke to the body of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And that intrigued me beyond measure at the time. And I think there was a point where, you know, the stuff that I was into then, and like that I would say is kind of like the nucleus of me being interested in the production side of film. And from then on, I was kind of fascinated by how films were made, not just like what the story was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely one that always sticks out in my mind. That's the one that I always cite.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like,
kind of,
that's a good one as well. Like, that is a good one to pick because obviously, production-wise,
I think it was the combination of the fact that I hadn't even considered that the voice and the body could be two different people. Because, you know, I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
Like that. But the fact that not when Star Wars came out, to be clear, but
we're not that old.
Yeah, but it was re-released in the late 90s, so that's when I first saw it. So it was that, and the fact that the guy who voiced Darth Vader was, of course, James Earl Jones, had also voiced Mufasa, which was another film that I loved at the time. And again, that was one of those things where it was like, you know, I was at an age where I hadn't even considered that, you know, cartoons had humans who voiced them.
Yeah.
They weren't just characters that sprang into being, you know. So yeah, I think that kind of is what I always cite as like my earliest memory of, you know, thinking about how films were made in that regard, and it's kind of been an interest of mine ever since. Because actually, originally, before I got into writing and directing to the extent that I have, is I wanted to be a special effects guy. I wanted to make practical effects. Yeah,
I never knew that about you. Surprisingly,
yes, that was something that I was always interested in. But then I think I kind of got swept up in the sort of more writerly side of things. But I've always but in the films that I've worked on have always had an element of you know, practical effects being kind of important to them. Yeah. So I've mostly made sort of horror and genre stuff like that. Or the ones that I've directed out, anyway.
Oh yeah, but, I know that's something that me and you both really have in common. We're both very sort of practical effects heavy.
Yeah.
Because it's better, just is.
Yeah, and I think the other one that I would bring up if you're talking about films that kind of got me interested in the production side of films is Terminator 2. Because there are scenes in that with scenes in that with CGI that are still very impressive, but there's scenes in that where there were practical effects. So like the bit where he pulls his hand off and there's like the robot hand underneath that iconic scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was one of those films where that was one of the first films I remember kind of being like, I want to figure out on a scene by scene basis how they made this movie. And that was something that I did a lot as a kid, was kind of be like, okay, I've seen the movie now, I want to figure out how they did it. And I was one of those people who, like, I consumed bonus features on DVDs like they were going out of fashion. Oh, and I guess the other one I should shout out, sorry if we're talking about bonus features, is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, which Mark knows I'm a huge fan of, because I'm...
as am I.
Yeah, so. But like the extended versions especially have just reams and reams of bonus features. And if you want to get your kid interested in filmmaking and they like Lord of the Rings, just get them to watch the double discs that each extended version has of just exhaustive featurettes about how they made it. So much of that is practical as well. I mean, so much of it was CGI.
Yeah.
But so much of it was practical.
But Peter... But that's the thing. Peter Jackson's always, well, probably not as much recently, but he was always like the practical effects guy, wasn't he? And because like Lord of the Rings was what CG was mostly just for like landscapes.
Well, and some of the creatures and stuff as well. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Gollum,
like I mean, like Helm's Deep and stuff. Yeah, but Helm's Deep and stuff is all miniatures.
Yeah, well, in fact, they made what they call bigatures, because they're miniatures that take up an entire room. So miniature relative to what they're portraying, but like Minas Tirith, like takes up an entire wall. Like it's colossal.
But it still looks so good on camera, though. That's the thing. Like it looks better than what CG could. I think it looks real.
And I think when you compare it to like The Hobbit, which they rushed out, which has so much more CGI, it pales in comparison. Because that's the thing, in The Hobbit they even have like the orcs and stuff for CGI, and there's just no need for that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because I like the Hobbit movies. Well, no, I think I'm being a bit generous by saying I like them. Because I think Desolation of Smaug is one of the most boring movies I've ever seen. It was just so tedious to get through. And I saw the extended version as well, and I was like, how long can they drag this out?
I've only seen the extended version of An Unexpected Journey. I've not seen the other two.
Yeah, and that goes on a fucking long time as well, doesn't it?
I mean, look, we may cover, we may cover Lord of the Rings at some point, or Peter Jackson's works at some point, but I definitely agree that the CGI in The Hobbit it like sticks out like a sore thumb. There's some better examples than others. Like I think Smaug is pretty well realised. But again, that's motion capture, so again, it's that thing of like.
Yeah, that's Cumberbatch's performance, and the footage of Cumberbatch playing Smaug is brilliant. It's so cool. It's just like he is clearly having the best time.
Writhing around on the floor. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, we don't need to litigate our thoughts on The Hobbit right now, but the point of that was, yes, Lord of the Rings was one. And in terms of, because that's the thing, most of the films that kind of got me into filmmaking are not going to be super like, oh, I watched this little art film in a cinema in Paris, and it turned,
I don't think anybody's like that. Yeah, I don't think anybody's like that.
For me, it was more like, I'd watch Jurassic Park and be like, but dinosaurs aren't real, so how did they make a film with a load of dinosaurs in? I was a big fan of Godzilla films as a kid as well, and that's like, those kind of things where it's like there's a lot of different kind of styles of special effects, and that is how I kind of got into film, both as a hobby and as something that I want to pursue more vocationally. Was like, just special effects stuff and kind of getting interested in how they did certain sequences in certain movies. Usually pretty big special effects driven movies. Indiana Jones is another one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're a kid, those are the kind of movies that really sort of capture your attention, isn't it? Like, I remember being both, like, because you mentioned Jurassic Park, and I remember the first time I saw Jurassic Park, I was like completely enthralled by it, but also terrified by it as well. Like that film as a kid is genuinely quite scary. I think
I can't really remember being scared by Jurassic Park, but then again, I was a dinosaur kid.
Yeah, so I was into dinosaurs as well, but I think I can't remember how old I was when I first saw Jurassic Park, but like the scene in the kitchen with the velociraptors,
there's definitely some tense moments. Like that opening scene in Jurassic Park is pretty scary as well.
Before I move on to the next question, I'm pretty sure you must have seen it, but have you seen the original footage from when they were figuring out how they were going to do the special effects for Jurassic Park, and at one point the velociraptors were stop motion? It's fucking terrifying. Yeah. Like, it's so scary looking. And I'm glad they didn't do that.
I think stop motion kind of inherently has like an eerie quality to it.
Yeah, I think it can sometimes veer into like that uncanny valley sort of thing. Yeah, because I remember as a kid as well, when I was a very young kid, I remember seeing the original King Kong and being really quite scared.
Well, there's something
by
about that where
because
they used real animal fur on the Kong model, the fur doesn't stay in one place. So nowadays they tend to use synthetic fur for stop motion animals, but back then they just use real animal fur, and so it just moves around. So like it gives the impression, and I always thought that was kind of more realistic because it gives the impression of like wind blowing Kong's fur around.
Yeah.
So it kind of it makes him feel more imposing than I think he would do with like modern stop motion.
I just remember finding him terrifying as a kid. Again, just like the way that stop motion moves as well. It's just really, really.
There's something
really
about like the fluidity of the movement with stop motion is kind of can be unnerving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question, this is, I imagine you probably might not go off on too much of a tangent with this one, but which film do you think you've seen the most times and why? And do you think you could possibly guess how many times you've seen it?
Oh, that is a difficult question. Because I'm a rewatcher. I watch films over and over again if I like them. So there's some films that I've just seen, ad infinitum, basically. One that springs to mind is like The Fifth Element. I've seen that a bunch of times. I wouldn't.
That's like the ultimate Sunday afternoon movie.
I wouldn't care to guess how many times I've seen that. It's definitely in the double figures. It's easily in the double figures, in fact. Because the thing is, there's a lot of films that I've seen many, many times because they. This is dating me a bit, but because we recorded them on VHS off the TV. And like those tapes were always just like in circulation,
I used to be the same. There's so many films that I used to have on like really poor quality VHSs that I taped off TV
with the adverts still in.
And so I remember like when I first got those movies on Blu-ray, it was weird seeing them in like high def without ad breaks and stuff because I'd always remember the points in the movie where the ad breaks were.
No, I'm the same. Yeah, when I first started getting like proper VHSs or DVDs or Blu-rays, there's certain films where yes, I was expecting an ad break at certain points. To answer the question, what film have I seen the most times? The Fifth Element's definitely one. As a kid, We're Back, A Dinosaur Story. I saw that a few times.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that one.
I've not seen it, but from my tenure working at CEX, it's one of those DVDs that I used to see on the shelf a lot and we used to sell quite a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like a niche nostalgia thing at this point, that one. Very weird movie. It's just strange. It's one of those kind of like sub-Disney animated movies where it's like not quite got the formula down and it's just a little bit off, we should do that for this, actually. We should do Way Back, A Dinosaur Story.
Sure, why not?
I've not seen it. So I've probably not seen it for like about 20 years or something, so...
Okay, if I'll have to think of something that can go alongside We're Back, a dinosaur story. Is that what it's called?
We will never refer to it simply as We're Back. We will always refer to it as We're Back, A Dinosaur Story.
But you
full title.
It's a good title.
But in terms of films I've seen the most, God, The Matrix comes to mind. Terminator 2. Hot Fuzz is definitely one because that's one that like I've put on just as I'm doing other things. Because that's a movie that I can watch, but I can also just kind of just have on and dip in and out of. Yes, I've seen that. Those are the ones that spring to mind. There's probably obvious ones that I'm not thinking of. Any given Star Wars film, I guess I've seen multiple times, apart from the sequel trilogy. Mostly because of recency. Like, I'm not one of those people who absolutely hates the sequel trilogy. It's just they've not been out for that long. I will say I've seen, of the sequel trilogy, I've seen The Force Awakens the most times. Because when I was still working at Sainsbury's, I got that as a Blu-ray treat. And during a month of quite harrowing depression, just watched it on loop to cheer myself up. And there was the week of Force Awakens where I watched it every day on a given week. So out of recent movies, I've probably seen that one quite a few times.
I feel like you chose a good one in that sense because there is something really quite joyous about Force Awakens.
I think now that the dust has settled on the sequel trilogy, not to turn this into a Star Wars discussion, but that's probably my favourite overall. I think The Last Jedi might be a better film, but like because of the payoff that it got, it's like a disappointing hand job at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I think it's because the only sort of thing I think is to Force Awakens' detriment is how safe it is.
Yeah.
It's Star Wars the greatest hits, but obviously that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, like it's easily the most watchable of the three.
Yeah, whereas Last Jedi very much goes in the complete opposite direction. That's why I like it so much.
Yeah.
But we won't get into that because that's a whole
That's
thing.
a whole nest of vipers. Yeah.
Yep. Last Jedi's good.
I like Last Jedi. I think it's gone down in my estimation since it came out, but mostly that's because of how it was resolved in Rise of Skywalker.
I was about to say, my opinion of it has gone up since Rise of Skywalker because honestly, that film is fucking awful.
Yeah, that is genuinely one of the worst films I've seen in recent years. Actually, that's not. It's one of the worst blockbusters I've seen in recent years. Cause,
major studio.
It's well shot and everything, and the acting is fine for the most part. So I can't really say it's like. And also, I'm not a fan of the hyperbole that surrounds these films. When people tell you about The Last Jedi, like it's the worst film ever made. It's like if that's the worst film ever made, then what is Porky's?
What is Porky's? A fucking
no,
classic.
But you know what I mean.
Actually.
It's like
I know.
Yeah,
what you mean.
it's
I know
like
what you mean.
how can that be the worst? Like by default, it is not the worst film ever made.
Like when like films like White Chicks exist,
it's like it cannot be.
And even then, White Chicks isn't even anywhere near the bottom list of like worst movies.
No, I mean like you and I have seen some proper shit in our times. Like when people tell me The Last Jedi is the worst film they've ever seen, I do say like, well then I envy you. Like are you?
Yeah, like have you watched many films?
Yeah. Have you seen 3 films? And that's the worst. I mean, have you seen The Boss Baby?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Like shit like that gets made.
The Emoji Movie exists.
I've thankfully never seen that. Thankfully.
Well, watch this space, listeners.
Yeah. Oh, don't make me.
We're going to double bill that with the what was it? Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties.
Because I forgot we're doing that. So.
No, we were pairing that with that slightly racist-looking Tarzan film that Bill Murray was in, weren't we?
Oh, was it? Yeah, we're going to do an episode on the worst Bill Murray movies.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm up for that.
Yeah. So, what was the question again? Oh, what film have I seen so many times?
Yeah, so many times.
Yeah. So those are the ones. I mean, most of the ones I mentioned in the first one, I've seen. Multiple times. Like the Indiana Jones movies, seen many times. A recent one is Grand Budapest Hotel. That's one that I've seen quite a few times. Movies of the 2010s that I watch on repeat is pretty much Grand Budapest and Skyfall. Skyfall's kind of got into the Heart of Fuzz territory where like I will put it on just to have something on, and I can kind of dip in and out of it, and it's one of those films where you can watch it from start to finish and be like, what a good film, or you can just have it on in the background and be like, oh yeah, this gives me good vibes.
I mean, I'm not even a Bond fan, and I really like Skyfall. I think that's just a really good movie.
Yeah, I think it's like unironically really good. Whereas like most of the Bond films I have like a kind of ironic appreciation for, but yeah, I think that one's actually like good.
I admire any movie that at the end just turns into Home Alone.
Yes, into a murderous Home Alone.
Judi Dench doing Home Alone.
Another one.
Give me that.
I feel like I'm naming really basic films, but Into the Spider-Verse I've seen quite a few times now.
So good.
Yeah,
so
that is.
good.
I don't even. I will pretty much unironically say that's become one of my favourite films. Like that's top 10 material for me.
It's the best Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, with no qualifiers, it is just the best Spider-Man movie.
Because Spider-Man 2 is pretty damn good.
I rewatched that recently with a friend of the show, and that holds up.
Yeah, I really like the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. I think they're both genuine. I think they're both kind of on par with each other.
The only ones that I have no time for are the Andrew Garfield ones, and unfortunately, I think Andrew Garfield was good, and I like Emma Stone in those movies, but the movies are fucking awful.
Well, I've never seen the second one. I've seen the first one, and my main issue is I hate the design of Lizard in it. Why does he have a humanoid face?
Yeah, I know. He looks like the like Michael Bay Ninja Turtles, where they just have like penis heads.
Yeah, give him a fucking snout. Like he needs to look menacing. They did the same with Killer Croc in Suicide Squad as well.
Yeah, I mean that's I've not even seen.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
I will say like I do watch art films, listeners. It's just it's just a case of like if you're talking about films that I've seen again and again and again, it's like it tends to be things that have like good associations or a comforting vibe,
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of art cinema.
Inglourious Bastards, I've seen
Yep,
many times, probably double figures with that as well. You asked me which one I've seen the most, and I've just given you a list of films that I've seen a lot. But
I mean, I kind of expected that anyway, but no, it's a good range of movies. That's a good segue into my next question.
Oh, The Thing as well. Don't forget The Thing.
Huh?
The Thing. I've seen The Thing.
Oh, I was about to say, I was like, what thing? I thought that was like an off-mic thing that you would do.
No, The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yes, great movie.
Roughly 1 million times. But for some reason, I can never remember who is the Thing in the blood test scene. I've seen it that many times, but I can never remember who it is. So I'm always like, oh shit, who is it?
Does that jump scare always get?
Every single time, hook, line, and sinker. There's something about that scene. I think it's engineered so that it kind of works that way. Where like
that whole movie is just engineered on paranoia as well. I think that's one thing that John Carpenter does best. Is he's really good at not only crafting suspense, but he knows how to create paranoia.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about Carpenter. I think at around Halloween time.
Oh, absolutely,
yes,
because I could always talk Carpenter.
We've not talked about this off mic, but I was considering doing a Carpenter Chaos episode for Halloween, where we get through maybe more than 2 Carpenter films.
I'm fine with that because I'm agreeing to that now, so that's happening. So that's on record that's happening.
Watch this space, listeners. I mean, knowing our production rate, that episode will come out at Christmas. But
probably Halloween at Christmas, we'll do that.
So Carpenter Chaos, watch this space. I think I've answered the question.
Yeah, several times over.
Yes, as is my want. Yes, go on.
So my next one, I'm pretty sure me and you are both the same in this regard. Like, we don't fully believe in the idea of like a guilty pleasure because if I
like something, I like it.
Yeah, exactly. But what film that is objectively awful do you just completely love?
Okay, well, this is one where I'm gonna. This is an interesting one because I don't know if I believe in the concept of objectively good or objectively bad films.
Okay.
I think there are elements you can measure objectively, but given that good and bad are qualifiers and therefore not objective, you can't really say something's objectively good or objectively bad because, like...
Oh, you just flipped that fucker back on me, didn't you?
Well, no, this is something... It's good you've answered this because this is something I've been pondering for a while. Because I definitely used to think more about in those terms. Whereas now I'm a bit like, well, if I like something, I obviously think it's good on some level. Or I get some enjoyment out of it. I mean, if you're talking about something like The Room, for example, you could say that's an objectively badly made movie, and I would agree with that. But... subjectively, people love it. It's one of the most successful comedies of all time. So, it's not...
Unintentionally.
Yeah, it wasn't intentionally a comedy, but that's how it's become. So I kind of... Do you see what I mean? It's sort of like... I don't think I'm explaining myself very well, but...
No, I completely get what you mean. I think that's kind of more what I was getting at, is like, a film that on like a filmmaking craft level, or just in how it's made, and how it's written, how it's structured, like, that is... bad, essentially. Like, that you can look at and go, this is not a good example of cinema.
Yeah, you can kind of look at it and go, by my usual standards, this is an awful movie. But
or just by cinematic standards, it's not good.
This is, but on some level, it entertains me. I mean, The Room is a kind of a basic example, but I definitely do find enjoyment in The Room. I think that's one of those films that's like, it's been tempered over time because it's become such a thing. It's kind of like the basic answer, right, to like what's a good bad movie. But I was there at the start. I was part of the early Room cult. But so that's a film that, like, it's interesting that it's had such a long life given how bad it is. But that's one that I mean, a recent example of a film that I can't say I disliked, but is definitely terrible is the movie Cats.
Cats is an experience,
and I would make an argument for that film. In terms of uniqueness, which doesn't necessarily mean, quality, but it's a movie that I'll never forget. It's seared into my eyeballs forever.
Oh, absolutely, and I think, considering all the bad reviews it got, and the video, it's well made in a sense.
Yeah,
but it's just. To me, it feels like every decision that director made was the wrong decision.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I personally don't think Tom Hooper is a good director. I think he's actually quite shit for the most part.
We've discussed this before.
His best film is The Damned United, which is not a film that is particularly to my interests, but I can say is pretty much a good movie.
Is that a football movie?
Yeah. It's about Brian Clough. And that's mostly good because Michael Sheen's in it, which
Fair enough.
playing Cluffy, and he's good in that. But yeah, like the King's Speech, I thought was shit. Well, not shit, but boring. I just thought it was boring.
No, I never saw it.
It's a play.
Yeah,
It's a play as a movie. It's like it's not cinematic. But look, we don't have time for me to bitch about the 2010 Oscars. But was 2010 the King's Speech? Was it?
Something like that. That sounds about right.
2011. So I know one of those years had like a ludicrously strong Oscars thing, and it was like the King's Speech wins best film. It's like, really? Out of that selection? I mean, the Oscars irrelevant anyway.
Yeah, so it's a load of bollocks mostly, but
what was the question? Terrible films that I like anyway. Oh, God, I'm really drawing a blank. This is the problem with doing this. I should have prepared earlier. What's a bad film that I like? Oh, hang on, I've gone. Okay.
Go on.
I think a film that is of debatable quality, let's say, that is definitely up there with one of my favourite films to watch / expose other people to, is Michael Bay's The Rock.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah,
I don't think you can really make an argument for it as a great film, but
that's a solid 90 minutes.
Yeah, and I will say, Nicolas Cage, I think it's longer than 90 minutes actually, but Nicolas Cage movies in general, he is to bad movies what he is to good movies. He is invaluable to both. But
he gives 110% no matter what, and you don't get many actors that do that.
And frankly, if we're talking bad movies that I love, a lot of them will feature Nicolas Cage. So like Vampire's Kiss is an example.
Yes.
I mean, you can't go wrong with Vampire's Kiss. That's a movie where it is, you could definitely make a case for that being objectively awful. But I've never known anyone to watch it and not be entertained by it. Like, it's just fucking hilarious, and his performance is so crazy. One movie that is offensive, eye-searingly poorly shot, and yet I think is genuinely brilliant in some ways, is Crank 2 High Voltage.
No, do you know what? I think Crank 2 is better than the first one.
Yeah, I think
because it's so ridiculous.
No contest, but it is a racist film. It's
troubling.
Yeah,
is what I would say. It's a troubling film, but I completely agree with you. It's such a good time.
I mean, this is a movie where within the first 20 minutes, Jason Statham shoves a shotgun up a man's ass.
It's true.
And that kind of sets the tone.
It's kind of amazing how the first Crank movie has this really silly premise, which they kind of make good on, and then the second one they kind of almost go like full Grindhouse on it.
Yeah, they go completely insane with it. Yeah, it's, I mean, if listeners haven't seen Crank 2, don't bother watching Crank 1. Just watch Crank 2.
Yeah.
I mean, Crank 1 is fun as well, but like, I almost think the experience is enhanced by not having seen Crank 1.
I'm pretty sure the events of the first movie are summarised in the second movie in like 2 lines of dialogue.
I can tell you that I've seen the second one recently. I've seen it before, but I watched it again recently. And it is summarised in the form of an 8-bit cartoon that starts the movie.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Yes.
Crank 2 is happening on this channel.
Yeah. Crank. Well, I mean, we could do Crank 1 and Crank 2. Just Crank. Summer of Statham.
Can we do Ghosts of Mars?
Again, that's another one. I love Ghosts of Mars. It's shit. It's awful.
I've not seen it in the longest time, but I remember it being
it's
dire.
Cinematic cancer, but I found it so funny and entertaining that you can't go too wrong with it. I mean, there's quite a lot of so bad it's good movies, I guess. I think my issue is like the difficulty that I always have with these questions, whether it's like guilty pleasure or like movies that are bad that you enjoy, is I do have that mentality of like, if I enjoy it, it must be good on some level. Or I must consider it good on some level.
You definitely see that has some merit, or it's got something in it that appeals to you. I mean, like my go-to is always Mortal Kombat Annihilation. That is a bad movie, but I love it. I love it so much. It's just high-budget Power Rangers.
Yes. Oh, well, you mentioned Power Rangers. I genuinely enjoyed the Power Rangers reboot.
Do you know what? Same, actually.
It's not a great movie, but I thought it was fun.
It was great. I think my favourite thing about that movie is like all of the actors playing the Power Rangers, like they're taking it very, very seriously because it's their first big role. And there was Elizabeth Banks that plays Rita Repulsa.
Yes.
She's having the best time.
Yeah. She's amazing.
And the fact that we never got a sequel is a shame, because I was like, okay, so they did Rita well. Where's Lord Zed?
Yes, we need Lord
Bring
Zed.
in Lord Zed.
We need some... Who would you cast as Lord Zed?
Oh, God,
I mean, Cage.
Yeah, do you know what? Yeah, come on.
Yeah. Oh, another one. Right. Actually, this is a debatable one. This might be controversial for the listeners. A bad movie that I unironically enjoy. Nicholas Winding Refn's Only God Forgives.
I've still never seen it.
A lot of people fucking hate that movie. I think it's great.
Well, we both do. We're both very big fans of the Neon Demon, which a lot of people would consider bad, and
those people are wrong though. They're objectively wrong.
Because the Neon Demon is just it's. I've always summarised it. It's like a Vogue cover gone cancerous. That's how I've always thought of it.
It's not a bad description.
That's how I'd describe it. Yeah, and I just love it because it's. The Neon Demon I love so much because it's so stylish, like it's gorgeous to look at, but underneath that it is the sleaziest, most grim fucking film imaginable.
Yeah,
and I think that's what Nicholas Winding Refn does best, I think.
Yeah, he's good at, he brings the sleaze. I mean, Only God Forgives is pretty sleazy as well.
So I've heard, yeah. My next question for you, which I feel like this one might be a bit brief, but is there a filmmaker that you feel like you should like, but you don't?
So many. This is the question. I knew you were going to ask this, and this question is designed to make the listeners hate me.
That's why I included
it. Especially since I just praised a Michael Bay film. Okay, I mean, the big one for me, and this is not a filmmaker who I hate, but is one that people feel that I would like, but I don't particularly, is David Lynch. There's some of his films that I really enjoy. There's some that I don't, and I find him to be fairly overrated by most cinephiles. I don't have any... He's one of those filmmakers that I don't have any ill will towards him. It's just like when I see people on the various, Facebook or Reddit pages that I'm on being like, "Oh my God, David Lynch," I'm always a bit like, for God's sake, like, he's made a few films that you would consider like, arguable classics. Blue Velvet and so on. But then he's made shit like Inland Empire, which is just like diarrhea as a film.
Yeah, I gotta give you that, because I definitely am not as... I mean, I love David Lynch myself. Yeah. I've definitely sort of softened on him a lot in recent years. Like, I used to be very sort of like a lot of adoration for him and stuff. But even I have to admit, Inland Empire is borderline unwatchable.
Oh, it is unwatchable. I wouldn't even say borderline. And he's one of those directors where I tend to find I like directors who are influenced by him more than I like him, if that makes sense. And I kind of feel like on a similar vein, I'd mention Alejandro Jodorowsky at this point, where there's a lot of filmmakers who are influenced by him that I really, really like, but his work does very little for me. It's like visually interesting, but it's kind of like that's sort of it. I think with both of them, I have this issue with both of them where it's like, okay, lads, I know you're doing the whole surrealism, like, you have to interpret it, it's like dream logic, but at the same time, you could just tell me a fucking story, like, don't waste 2 hours of my life, please. And I don't always feel like that about surrealist films. There's just certain ones that kind of... I think it's the arse-licking of both of those directors that pisses me off more than it is them themselves. It's the thing of, like... Although, actually, Jodorowsky I've got a few issues with, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with that, don't you?
Yeah, I think he's kind of a prick, but that's... he's certainly not the worst prick to be a filmmaker, but he is a prick nonetheless. So those two spring to mind. I'm trying to think of other directors who... Because I would say M. Night Shyamalan, but I think he's at a point now where people don't expect you to like M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, he's a good ideas man. He just has very poor follow through, I think.
Yeah, he's all fart and no poo.
I like that. He just released a new movie, didn't he?
Yeah, about a beach that makes you go
old.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, that's such a shit premise.
But you know what? It's funny that we've mentioned M. Night Shyamalan because he. I don't like most of the films of his that people think are good. Like, I hate The Sixth Sense. But the films of his that I do like are, like, Split.
you know what? I think Split is a great bad movie.
I think it's good. I
don't think it is. I think it's kind of bad. I feel like if you took James McAvoy out of that movie, it would suck absolute arse.
Yeah, but he's in the movie.
I think he is the real saving grace of it, I think.
Yeah, but he is in the movie, so...
Yeah, so like Anya Taylor-Joy, I think she's better than that movie, I think. But no, I don't know. Split really didn't do it for me. I was just like...
I mean, I could watch Anya Taylor-Joy do pretty much anything.
Oh, she could read the phone book and I'd watch it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Lynch and Jodorowsky, I get it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think
Jodorowsky. Well, for me as well with Jodorowsky is like, I do quite like his films. Like I've seen Holy Mountain, I've seen El Topo. I've never seen Santa Sangre. That's kind of the one that I feel like I should see.
Yeah, that's the one that I think is alright.
Yeah, but as much as I enjoyed El Topo and Holy Mountain, those are not films I'm in a rush to rewatch.
Yeah, they're the kind of movie. This is kind of my issue with him. People go on about how great and what a visionary he is, but like, I don't think there's any of his movies where I'd go, do you know what I fancy today?
Yeah,
I feel like Mountain.
Yeah, like the Holy Mountain is a movie to at least experience once, I think.
Yeah,
especially if you're interested in film. Yeah,
I'd recommend with Jodorowsky and Lynch that people check them out because people really, really like them. This is my personal opinion, it's not objective, but it's yeah. So those are the two that definitely spring to mind in that regard. I'm trying to think if there's any else that are obvious ones that are jumping out at me, but I don't think so.
Well, to let you know, my next question is actually in a very similar vein to this. So.
Oh wait, hang on, I've got one.
Go
on. He's kind of a writer and director. This is kind of the other end of the spectrum. So like Jodorowsky and Lynch, because people know I like weird, surreal movies. At the other end of the spectrum, people who know that I like geeky, nerdy shit, tend to be surprised that I vehemently hate most of Joss Whedon's work.
That's yeah, I sort of see that. Well, you know me, I absolutely adore Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but aside from that, I'm not the biggest Whedon fan.
Yeah. I used to be quite into Firefly, but I've not rewatched it in a long time. But yeah, pretty much everything else he's done outside of that I hate. Including his Marvel movies, even though I like Marvel movies. I'm sorry, art house movie fans. I sometimes like to be entertained. I'm sorry.
It's funny because there's because I've got a couple. Obviously, I've got like the sort of core question I was going to ask you, and then we've got some other sort of mini ones as well. And it's funny you should bring up MCU because I do have something that pertains to that as well.
Oh, lovely.
But I'll go on to my next one for you because this is a very similar question to one that I just asked you. Which actor for you is like an instant 4 stars anytime they appear? I was going to go 5 stars with that, but like, I don't think any actor is purely worth 5 stars. Maybe Nicolas Cage, but like to you, just like what actor, if they're in a movie, you're like...
It raises the star rating.
Yeah.
The one that always springs to mind here is John Goodman.
Yep.
A bit of a left field choice, I don't know, but...
no, he always brings the goods.
I'm never... He always brings the goods, man. I'm never... Well, I've said this before, that because of my... I mean, you know about my thing of, like, there are certain actors that just raise the star rating of any movie by being in it. You know that the 90s live-action Flintstones movie, for me, is a 5-star film, because it includes John Goodman and also Rick Moranis. So, therefore, it's 5 stars.
Can't fault that logic.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, technically that's an 8-star movie.
I know,
so,
yeah. Because
why it didn't win Best Picture?
Yeah, because Rick Moranis is one for me. I know he doesn't.
Also, no,
he doesn't act.
You're forgetting the most important part of the Flintstones movie: the fact that the B-52s are in it.
Well, exactly, yeah, which makes it a 10-star out of 5 movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, unironically, yeah, I love Rick Moranis. My favourite performance of his is in Streets of Fire. Have you seen that?
No, that's one of those movies that has been on my list for a while.
That is that's definitely like, stay tuned, listeners. We're doing that one.
Yeah, because every time I've been told about that movie, I'm like, how have I never seen this?
Interestingly, since I've just been slagging off David Lynch, Harry Dean Stanton.
Yep.
I think it's Roger Ebert who said that no film can be truly bad if it includes Harry Dean Stanton. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Let's pick some women. Anya Taylor-Joy, I'd say, is a recent one where I'm like, do you know what? Her presence elevates any movie.
Even though these are your answers, I'm just throwing her out there. Tilda.
Oh yeah, Tilda. Yeah, always. Of course. Yeah, Tilda.
Tilda's just magnificent in anything she's in.
Yeah, I like Tilda. Trying to think. Daniel Kaluuya is one for me, who's been turning up in a lot of movies and stuff recently.
Yeah, he's very much like rising star, isn't he? Which is good to see.
Yeah, I think he's great, actually. He's a very like naturalistic actor. On a similar note, and I've not actually seen Judas and the Black Messiah yet, but they're both in this. Lakeith Stanfield, I really like, and whenever he, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but whenever he turns up, big fan of him.
I really loved Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah, he's great in that.
Wonderful.
He's actually quite good in the Death Note live action movie. He plays L in that. The movie's,
does he?
Yeah, the movie's not good, but yeah, he plays L in that.
Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I never, because obviously there's already the live action Death Note movies.
Yeah, the Japanese ones. Yeah,
which I don't remember being terrible.
They
probably are
fine, but the CGI is very dated.
Yeah.
Well, actually, speaking of the American Death Note, Willem Dafoe raises any movie for me.
Oh yeah, it's very true.
Love a bit of Dafoe. I think there's probably more. I'm trying to think now. Yeah, there's loads of actors that I really like. I think those are ones where, like, if they're in a movie, it's reason for me to check it out. You know.
Yeah, because they're always just great to watch. Yeah.
A weird one, Paul Giamatti. Whenever you get,
no, I get it.
Whenever you get some Giamatti, I'm like, yes.
Big fan of Shoot 'Em Up over here, so. Which is just. Oh.
I will say, Kurt Russell. I will check out pretty much any movie with Kurt Russell. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, he improves most movies. He's in some bad movies.
Absolutely.
On a similar note to that, Bruce Campbell. He definitely elevates any film he's in.
Again, similar to Nick Cage, he just gives it his all. He's always just good to watch it. Like, you can tell Bruce Campbell is always having fun, and that's why I like
he is more versatile than people give him credit for, I think.
Oh, for sure. Bubba Hotep is his Oscar performance, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
I'll throw out there as well Octavia Spencer. I feel like if I'm watching a bad movie but Octavia shows up, I'm like, well, that's a good scene.
Yeah, did you see Ma that she was in? That
No,
horror
I really
movie?
want to because it looked terrible.
It's pretty bad. She's great in it.
Yeah.
She's very, very good in it, and it's got a really good premise, but it just squanders it. It's surprisingly nasty, though. There's some really horrific violence in that movie. I was quite surprised by it, but the movie overall kind of sucks.
I will also add to this, after a certain point, Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, absolutely, because he's now proven himself to be a real.
Yeah. His early films not so much, but in his current career path, definitely Pattinson. Yeah. He just makes weird choices, and I love that.
He's doing the same thing to a lesser degree that what Daniel Radcliffe has done. Daniel Radcliffe has gone out of his way to be in weird movies.
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
And I saw Guns Akimbo not long ago, which is not a great movie, but that's him.
I didn't think much of that movie, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it was him and
Samara Weaving.
Samara Weaving? Yes, I don't know why I forgot her name because I love her.
I love her as well. Yeah, she's great.
She's very quickly becoming like a really great like genre actress.
Oh, let me just rattle off a couple more actors who raised the star rating for me. Frances McDormand.
Yes, she's always great.
Love her. Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
I'm not just naming the Three Billboards cast, but Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, this is the Three Billboards.
Yeah.
This is literally Three Billboards.
Dinklage.
Yeah.
John Hawkes, and he's also in that movie.
Yeah.
Anyone who's in Three Billboards.
To be fair, stellar cast.
Yeah.
Like, really stellar cast.
That was one of those. I've only seen it recently, and we will be covering it at some point. But, yeah, watching that movie, I was like, fucking hell, this is like every actor almost that I like has just turned up in this movie. But yeah, definitely, I definitely want to shout out John Hawkes because he's a fucking phenomenal actor, real character actor. But he's fantastic. Whenever he's in anything, I'm like, what a great actor, because he plays characters who are like real sweethearts and you love them, and he plays characters who are real nasty bastards. Like, I don't know if did you ever see the movie Winter's Bone?
No, I haven't. I've been told that's obviously like apparently Jennifer Lawrence is really.
I think
good
possibly still her best performance, which is not to diss J-Law, but yeah.
No, I'm a big fan of Mother, personally.
Oh yeah, that's quite good. But
I think she's very.
She's
good
more of a
that.
character in Winter's Bone, though, whereas in Mother she's more archetypal. But John Hawkes is in that, and he is a real piece of work in that movie. And it's like the scenes that he's in. There's this incredibly tense scene in it. I don't want to give it away because we should cover it on the podcast. And he just like he's magnetic in it. You know, it's one of those like he's one of those actors. I feel like he's so unsung, but whenever he turns up and stuff, I'm like, what a guy, what a legend.
Nice. So that was like kind of the bulk 5 questions, and we've still got a little bit of time remaining, so we're going to keep these ones a little bit shorter.
I am definitely going to chop that intro to ribbons as well. So, because the bit where we talked for like 10 minutes about Ace of Base is not making it into the podcast.
I don't know. Well, you can have a little bit of that.
I think I already know how I'm going to remove that. One thing that you do that is very helpful to me as an editor, Mark, is you frequently go, anyway, as you start a sentence, which means that I'm like, oh good, I don't have to link that to anything. I can just chop a big chunk out.
The only thing I need to stop doing, and I've noticed it in the recordings, the amount of times I say something, and then it just tails off into a laugh at the end.
Yes.
That's just one of my weird quirks.
Yeah. It's not too bad. That's one that's quite easy to clear up for the most part.
Yeah. But yeah, so obviously you're going to cut around this.
No, I'm leaving this.
I've got like so yeah, I've got just like these are sort of quick fire ones, I guess.
Hit me.
So yeah, I've got a couple more sort of mini questions, I guess, because we've still got a little bit of time remaining. So we're going to cap this one at around an hour. This is going to be a bit shorter than
we'll say an hour
episodes.
to 90 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to keep this one a bit shorter. So I was going to ask you this. So if you could have one more film from any filmmaker that's no longer making films, be it because they're retired or dead or whatever, who would you want to see make one more movie?
Okay. I mean, the obvious answer for me is John Carpenter, but the issue with that is his last couple of movies are not incredible.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
If he could come out of retirement and just smash out one more masterpiece, that would be... mwah. You know,
yeah, it'd be the perfect way to end his career as well, because does he really want? Do any of us want The Ward to be his last movie? No, no, we don't.
Nobody.
There's
people.
does.
I guess there's kind of answers that spring to mind, like Kubrick and things like that. But I think he's one of those guys where like his filmography is so kind of airtight anyway that it's like, well, it doesn't feel like there's anything missing from that necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I feel like I wouldn't want another movie from Kubrick as more I wish he could have been alive a little bit longer, because I feel like Eyes Wide Shut doesn't feel finished.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely feels like it was finished without him overseeing the entire process, which I think is a detriment.
I'll tell you what, with Kubrick, I'll say I would have liked to see him live into the age of prestige television and see what he would do with that format. That I think.
Yeah, I feel. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Actually, it would have been great to see him sort of make that transition as well.
I mean, I think that's probably. I mean, my answer is John Carpenter, really.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will.
Yeah. So it would be good to see him have like one last masterpiece, like you say, because I mean, just last night I watched Scream 4 again, because I've seen that movie quite a few times. Because I've been I've got a friend who's a big old fraidy cat when it comes to horror movies, so I'm slowly easing her in. I was like, Scream's a good starting point. And I was watching it last night, and it just speaking on like a similar level to that, it was nice watching that again and knowing that was Wes Craven's last movie, because I at least feel like his last movie was a good one at least. Like Scream 4, I think, is actually quite good.
On a high, yeah.
Yeah, because the film he did before Scream 4 was fucking awful.
What was the one he did before Scream 4?
So it's called My Soul to Take.
Oh god, yeah, I never even saw that.
Yeah, apparently that was so bad due to studio meddling. Apparently Wes Craven signed on, and then when they actually got to shooting the movie, the script was like completely different. Yeah. So, but it's bad, that movie. It's very, very bad. This one's a bit of a left field one, and something that me and you talk about a lot anyway. But if you had to choose, who is the best of the slasher movie villains, and why?
Best of the slasher movie villains.
Who's your favourite and why?
That's a difficult question that I wasn't prepared to answer today. So if we just quickly compile a list, so we've got Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers,
Chucky.
Yeah, of course, Chucky.
Ghostface,
Ghostface. Although I think I'd have to disqualify Ghostface because it's not one person.
Yeah, it's multiple people under the same persona.
He gets,
yeah.
He gets excluded on a technicality.
But like, at least like the whole Ghostface thing, even though it's different people, they always have the same shtick.
Yeah.
At least it's always the same costume. It's always the phone calls.
Yes. But I think he is. Well, they are immediately being moved down the list for not being a recurring villain who can't die, which I think is a key element of slasher movie antagonists.
Yeah, I've always sort of because some people always put people like Pinhead in there, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't really call the Hellraiser movies slasher movies.
No, Pinhead's like a horror villain. He's not a slasher villain.
Yeah,
I think he's kind of like...
I think there's only...
Pinhead kind of gets in there because he's a bit Freddy Krueger. Like, they're kind of... There's some overlap there, I guess, because they're both, like, supernatural villains who, like, play games with people.
I think, yeah, and I think outside of, like, the main ones that we've already mentioned, the only sort of recurrent slasher villains I can think of was, like, Angela Baker is one.
Yeah.
Which is... honestly, wouldn't begrudge that choice.
Do we count Norman Bates?
Yeah, Psycho's a series.
He is a recurring villain, yeah, so yeah.
Also, just throwing it out there, Psycho 2 and Psycho 3 aren't actually that bad at all. They're surprisingly alright films.
Yeah. Okay, my answer is Hannibal Lecter.
So what, we'll just leave it at that.
And if people have a problem with me calling him a slasher villain, then tough titty.
I think that you could. We'll move on to the next one. Please direct all of your hate mail towards... No, I'm not going to give you your address. So this is what I was sort of getting at earlier when you mentioned Marvel. I was like,
Yes.
What are your thoughts on directors like Scorsese saying that like the MCU is ruining cinema?
I think Martin is... if I can call you Martin. I think he's...
Marty. I think he prefers Marty from what I've heard.
We're not that familiar. I think Scorsese... I'm going to choose my words carefully here. I think he has the right to say whatever the hell he wants about whatever the hell he wants at this point. I will also say, the cunt is like 85. I am not shocked he doesn't enjoy Marvel movies. Like, that is not a shock to me, given that they are aimed at 12-year-olds.
I think it's a bit of sour grapes, you know.
I wouldn't go that far. I've seen people say that. I think it's just old man yells at cloud. Really,
Yeah,
that's kind of how I see it. And to be fair, if you read what he actually said about it, he was saying like, I people enjoy them and they're well made and all that. He was saying they're not cinema. But my thing with that is, I don't think it's meaningful to distinguish between a movie and cinema.
Yeah,
I
all
think
the same.
it's like when people kind of say about like, oh, there's literature and then there's entertainment and all that kind of thing. And we know people who this is their opinion, like they see cinema and entertainment as these two different things. But I do think that's kind of a wrong-headed way of thinking about it. It wasn't so long ago that you could find journalists, snobby cinema journalists, dismissing his work as pulp entertainment.
Yeah,
so I kind of think his work has been vindicated by time and by the fact that there have been scores of directors influenced by his stuff. And I would say that anyone who dismissed Martin Scorsese as like just being a pulp filmmaker is not entirely wrong, but not entirely correct either. Like,
I feel like there's very pulpy elements to his work, but also he takes his craft very seriously.
I mean, this is the man who directed Shutter Island, which is like pure
Cape Fear.
melodrama. Cape Fear, yeah.
Cape Fear is such a trashy movie, but it's elevated by the fact it's got De Niro and Jessica Lange, and it's.
So I guess when I read that comment, these are the kind of movies that I was thinking of, and you kind of go like, well, I know you've done artsy fartsy movies as well, but like, let's be honest, the movies that people remember you for are not necessarily those. It's like, yes, Taxi Driver, is a cinema classic, right? But it is also it's kind of a trashy movie as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, at its core, it is. Yeah, it's about a Vietnam vet with PTSD who saves a child prostitute. Like, it's not.
Yeah, it's very.
It's not high art, is it? Like,
well, this is the thing. I think the distinguishing between low art and high art is usually kind of meaningless. Like, obviously, I'm not saying that like the drawing on a pug is the same as the Mona Lisa. I'm just kind of saying like this stuff it's meaningless to me. And I think the thing is like. There's a lot of directors, like Denis Villeneuve has just come out being like, some of the Marvel movies are a bit cut and paste and stuff, which is a fair criticism, but also you have to remember these people are being asked questions about these movies.
True.
Like, they're not just proffering their opinion out of nowhere, and it's also just kind of like, again, I don't expect French-Canadian art house director Denis Villeneuve to be a massive fan of Iron Man.
Yeah,
it's like. Yeah,
I do kind of love him saying, "Oh yeah, they're all just trying to cut and paste and all this." It's like, mate, you're making Dune. How many times have we done that?
Yeah, and like Dune looks good. I'm hyped for Dune.
Yeah, no, it does look good. But Denis, in my opinion, he's the best like director in the studio system working currently. Like he's consistently great.
He's definitely up there for me. And like I will say this. I think most of the directors that I really really admire tend to be people who can see the value of trashier stuff as well as the artier stuff.
Yeah,
Christopher Nolan, for example, is famously a big fan of the Fast and the Furious franchise. I believe his favourite installment is Tokyo Drift. I've never seen them, but again, it's that thing of like I think, you know, and like when you hear Quentin Tarantino talk about movies, he'll talk about like French art house movies from the 90s, but he'll also talk about, you know, fucking sleazy 70s exploitation movies.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know that one of his favourite movies is My Bloody Valentine. Like, he talks at length about how much he loves that movie.
Yeah, and that movie is, you know, crap. But it's
yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? Like, I was surprised by how not great that movie was, considering how like built up it was in like the sort of slasher canon. I think it's one of the lesser ones personally, but that's a discussion.
Ultimately, what I would say to that, this has been a longer answer than I think you were asking.
Possibly, yeah, but
is what I'll say is this: cinema was invented to entertain the masses. That is the
first
purpose
and foremost, yeah.
Yes, that is and that's not to say that the art form hasn't been elevated in subsequent decades, centuries, years. It's just to say, just decades. Actually, it's not been around for centuries yet.
Almost, though, almost.
Not centuries plural, but
yeah, but almost, yeah.
Yeah, but but the point is this: cinema is inherently a populist art form. Without the audience, you don't have cinema, and cinema is invented to be watched by a large audience in one place. When you go to a cinema, you are expecting there to be a crowd, right? So, to me, yes, we can debate the quality of movies. Yes, we can debate, you know, is it... And, like, look, Martin Scorsese has a valid point about, like, yes, the studios want to make a certain type of movie. But I also think he's kind of talking out of his arse, because the advent of streaming has meant that independent films are so much easier to find now. Yeah. I remember a time when I was looking for, you know, independent movies, things that are a bit off the beaten track, and I had to go through like hours and hours and hours of searching to find some shitty quality rip that had, you know, Czechoslovakian subtitles that you couldn't remove.
Or go on eBay and buy a copy of it on DVD or something. You know,
and half the time, if it was something that you're importing from like Japan or somewhere like that, it had been filmed off someone's camcorder.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know.
So, you know, it swings and roundabouts. This debate has been around forever. This thing of like the studios are ruining movies, and I think the thing is that people don't always appreciate is that like these things go in cycles. You know, there was a studio system in the 30s and 40s, and then that gave way to New Hollywood, and the studio system kind of came back in the 80s, and then that gave way to the independent cinema of the 90s, and so now we're kind of in the backlash from that, where we're kind of living through a new studio system, and the point is the wheel will turn round again, and as it always does, you know. And I think we're already getting to the point where people are kind of fed up with the Marvel formula, and that's the thing. People always want to say Marvel, but it's not just Marvel, is it? It's like
it's comic book movies. Yeah,
well, it's not just comic book movies. Like there are formulaic blockbusters coming from all angles. I think the thing that is, you know, very kind of indicative or like a sign of the times is the franchise movie, particularly. Yeah. As I was saying about like, you know, the studio systems it always kind of waxes and wanes between like the studios dominate everything, and then there's like New Hollywood and there's studios again, and then it's the independent boom of the 90s, and then it's, you know, and it kind of goes round and round in circles like that. So like we are going to get to a point where Marvel, Disney, whatever isn't just dominating every cinema screen going. But yeah, this is the thing as well. People need to understand that like streaming has changed the way that people consume media in general and film in particular, where I think, you know, the movies that people want to go to a theatre to see are generally your Marvel movies, your Disney movies, these big blockbusters, right?
Yeah, they bring in, like you say, they bring in a crowd, and that's the thing. Like, as much as, you know, some people may trash these movies, they get people in cinemas. They get people sitting down in their seats.
But at the same time, I talk to people who would never have watched half the kind of independent artsy stuff that they do now, but they do because it's convenient. It's on Amazon, it's on Netflix.
Yeah,
exactly. It's just there. So
there's no consequence to watching it, because you can just turn it off if you don't want to watch it.
Exactly, and it pops up and they go, oh yeah, I'll go on that. I'll have a bang on that. So, you know, Martin Scorsese is entitled to his opinion, and, you know, I'm sure he knows things about the industry that I don't, but it's, you know, it's whatever. I don't think Martin Scorsese is struggling to get films made, let's just say that.
Yeah, exactly, and, you know, his name still draws people in.
Yeah. I mean, I watched 4 hours of that fucking Irishman film.
I've not even attempted that yet.
Watch it in installments.
I've heard it. I've heard it's good, but to invest that amount of time in it.
Do you know what the thing with The Irishman is? The first hour or so is kind of dreck, but then it starts. It's almost like a season of TV where like it kind of gets better as it goes along.
Yeah.
Like you sort of have to watch the pilot episode, i.e. the first 90 minutes, to kind of know what's going on as the movie goes on. But then like the final act is really, really good, and that is kind of like the point of the movie, and it kind of justifies everything else you've seen. But yeah, there's some stuff in it, like his choice of de-aging some of the actors is like, oh mama, that just doesn't work. Like they've de-aged, they tried to de-age, like there's a bit in the first act where like they've tried to de-age Robert De Niro from, he's like 60, 70 now, right? And he's like...
Oh, he's older than that.
Yeah, but they've de-aged him down to like... all the characters are referring to him in this part of the movie as the kid. So you'd imagine he's supposed to be like 20 odd, right? But he looks like 40, if that, when they've de-aged him. And also, he moves like an old man. And it's the same with Joe Pesci, when they've like de-aged him. Because they de-aged Joe Pesci to be like middle-aged rather than old.
Yeah.
But like, again, he moves like an old man because he's fucking old as shit. Like, it just doesn't work. But then the bits where they're playing old men are like transcendental. They're really, really good. But and like when Al Pacino shows up, the movie kind of starts getting good as well. Like the kind of preamble, you didn't need the 4 hours, Marty. That's my point. You could have, or if you're going to do the 4 hours, just hire some young actors, put him in the same flat cap that De Niro's wearing. Yeah. That's fine. And I want to say this to the Marvel people as well. It is fine to hire an actor who looks a little bit like the older version of the character. We've been doing that for decades, and no one's ever had a problem with it.
Honestly, like a film that I don't know if you have seen yet, but I really, really like. Doctor Sleep did that with the flashback scenes to The Shining. They just cast actors that look like Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, and these actors, they're not doing impersonations of Nicholson and Duvall, but like they're just playing those characters in similar ways, and it's so much better as a result.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel cringy or creepy, or it just, I'm like, oh, there you go, that's Jack and Wendy.
Yeah.
You know, it works.
Right. Anyway, that was a really long answer to that question.
That's pretty much all my questions for you anyway. So that was good. So obviously, this is a lot of the stuff that we talked about is obviously stuff that I already know, but I think it's good for people to know a little bit more about us.
Yeah, it's for the benefit of the listeners. Yeah,
it's the first time I've ever done anything for the benefit of the listener.
I hope that I gave coherent answers. I feel like I was mostly just rambling.
But, that's what the show is. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few episodes that isn't going to be like 2.5 hours. So.
Yeah, that's true.
The audience are here for the ramble.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to do this again, but so we're going to flip the script, and it's going to be me rambling. So
yes, so look forward to that.
Okay, right. We'll see you next time then, guys.
In a bit, fuckers.
Was that a Bruce Almighty reference?
It wasn't, but let's say it was.
You can cut that. Keep that in.
Swedish, I knew them when they were a Lancashire clog dancing trio. But Betty, Boris and Angela.